Pursuit of Growth show, where we hold candid conversations with fascinating individuals from all walks of life to learn about their passions, successes, failures, lessons learned, and how they apply personal growth to their lives. We'll end the conversation with key takeaways that we can all implement to better ourselves and those around us. As always, I'm joined by my co-host and good buddy, Sammy Gonzalez. What is up, Sammy?
I tell you what, Greg, I'm super excited about introducing you to Cory Procter and everyone that's watching today. Cory is somebody that I'll get into kind of the way that we met here shortly, but I want to give everyone just a little short snapshot of an introduction about who he is, because if you can talk about fascinating people, I definitely think that he's going to fit the bill. So I'm excited to get into this conversation. So his bio is from NFL Offensive Lineman to husband and father, professional speaker, and financial investment advisor. Cory has held many titles and roles, but what separates him from the pack is his drive to help others and win. Above everything, Cory is a warrior for his team, his family, his clients, and his faith. So Cory, welcome to the Pursuit of Growth show.
Sammy, Greg, it's good to be here, fellas.
Thank you so much for the time.
Let's jump into it.
Let's do it. So we always like to have that first big question that's going to open up all the rest of the conversations for us. But we really wanted to know from your history, did you have a defining moment in your life in which you thought to yourself, I can play football professionally? Or was this something that you just kind of worked your whole life and once you started playing the sport, you just kind of fell into it?
Oh, it's a progression. There's never a definitive moment. I mean, there might be times, but confidence is rarely just a moment where I know. It's usually a progression of confidence. And so I was like any other kid. I wanted to play in the league. It sounded awesome, and it's a big dream, and it's cool. But the reality started in college, my freshman year, when I would see guys work out for the pro days. And so these were guys that I thought were good players. And I see their work out for the pro days. I remember one guy was Thatcher Soleil I went to the University of Montana, and he went undrafted and bounced around a couple different teams. But he played some years, and guy I looked up to a lot and kind of a mentor to me when I was in Montana. And then as I progressed in college and see more and more of these guys that are kind of moving on and getting shots, that was confidence in me and myself, where I'm like, man, if they can do it, I can do it. And so you still go through some bumps, even in Detroit when I was there on the practice squad. That was a time that I really needed to develop, to be honest, because I was really hypersensitive and kind of overworked myself and would get a little too anxious, which caused you to play really stiff. And so I needed that time to work and get used to the atmosphere. Well, not everybody needs that, but I did. And what was neat was I got used to it. Dallas picked me up after Detroit, and I got into a different atmosphere where I was just playing a whole lot better, and that confidence grew. And that can go up and down. But for me, it was a real progressive grab at that. And so the more examples that I saw of people grabbing it or able to get it, that's what gave me some juice to be able to go.
As a former offensive lineman myself, left tackle, that's one of the areas that I really concentrate on when I watch the game still to this day. Is I don't look at the quarterback. I look at the offensive defensive battles that are right there on the field too. So as an offensive lineman, there's little glitz and there's little glam or media attention, unless you mess up, that's usually whenever they pay attention to you. But talk about some of those motivating factors of playing the position that you played, which is offensive guard, and then what kept you engaged in the games and in the sport.
Kept me engaged. Well, I tell you, coaches were always big father figures to me. And maybe I didn't identify that at the time, but they were big role models. And so, and that kind of stems a little bit because I come from a split family, and during a tough time when my folks got divorced and going through that transition, coaches were a big deal to me. Right? I was able to lean on them, and it was just kind of. I still remember seventh grade ball when I played my first year, and I was on the team. But the first kind of positive reinforcement that really hit me was we're doing Oklahoma drill. They needed a running back, and I just jumped in. They yelled at me to get the ball and just needed a body. And for whatever reason, I decided to go hard on that play. Just give a good effort. That's all it was. And I ran over one of the guys during the drill, and coach flipped out. And he's yelling at you, "Good job, Procter!" And all of a sudden, neurotransmitters start blowing up in my head, and I get this high from the praise that you would give me, and so I started seeking that out in a huge way, and I carried that through college into professional ball, and ultimately, it might even played a little detriment at times, but I wanted you to look at me in such a positive light that I was willing to kill myself to go do it. And so coaches were a massive deal to me. I loved working out with my teammates and working hard, but if you stepped in the room as my coach, like, I straightened up in a heartbeat. And so that was a huge motivating factor to me. There's lots of different things to do for that, right? But I wanted that, and so so there was the good. When I did really well and I got some praise, man, I felt like I was on top of the world. And then there was bad when you would get cut, and you're like, how can you're basically like a family member to me. How can you cut me out of your life? And so those are some tough swings that a lot of athletes go through. But coaches were a massive driver in my life. I went after that praise in a big way.
Cory, I'm interested to talk a little bit about mindset. And so you mentioned earlier that when you were with the Lions, you needed that time on the practice squad to really be able to work through that anxiousness. And then I can imagine, you go from that period of time where you're dealing with a whole different set of, maybe, I don't want to say mental games, that's not the right word, but just the challenges that mentally you're going through. Then you get to the point in your career where it's performance-based, and you've got to make sure that you're being there for your team, you're being there, for your quarterback, for your coaches. Talk a little bit about how you worked through that in your mind, and what were some of maybe the tactics, or just the in addition to the preparation and the work, what are some of the things that you did to help you to kind of progress as a professional athlete?
I tell you, I was still really immature in my playing days. That's almost 10. It's just after 10 years ago. November was my 10-year anniversary from my injury that took me out, but which is crazy to think about. But I was still really immature in that I felt like I just beat my head against the wall, and I could go work harder, and I could do a lot of different things. As I look back on it, I realized some of the best games I ever had was when I just kind of said screw it, and I let everything unload off of me. And what I mean by that is, you guys know we can go to work, and I still love this mentality a lot, but like, you might go to work and this guy's not doing his job, this guy's not doing his job, he sucks at his job, he just does a crap job, and there's like whatever the reason is, and you're like, fine, I'll do it myself. And I appreciate that in a big way, because we need more guys, frankly, like that, where they're willing to take a load. But we can do it so much that it ends up hurting us in a big way. Some, especially guys, where we end up working, 100 hours a week, that ends up dive bombing our families. And so, the best times that I played were those times where I got so frustrated, maybe from, getting corrected all the time, or maybe I wasn't performing up to the way that I wanted to be, or just the anxiety in general. I had this inner angst that was going on all the time. And the times that I played the best is when I said, screw it, and I mean, cuss, I would say fuck it at times. And I'm like, I don't care. I'm just going to go play ball. I don't care anymore. Yeah. And those were times I got game balls. And it was crazy, because when I gave up control, and I lowered myself, or I brought myself to just the level of play and practice that I was used to. And man, my performance stepped up in a whole big way. And the times where I was trying to force my control on situations was when my play took a downturn. And frankly, that happened in my relationships too. I even got into a fight with my old line coach the day before I got hurt in Miami, and it was because I disagreed with the guy, and so I tried to take things in my own hands, and I didn't even think that he was my superior, and that I needed to be on his team in order for him to be on mine first before I could really accelerate on the team, and especially my play. But I tried to control the situation fully in my own. Fine, you don't want to do it, I'll do it, right? But it wasn't you weren't willing to work as my coach. It was just, we just disagreed, and so we were butting heads on this, and so I would just try to take everything on my hands. Well, now I'm screwing the pooch for everybody right now.
Yeah.
Because if I'm trying to take control and you guys aren't on board with what I'm doing right now, well, in a team sport, that's just the same thing. You're dive bombing your family.
Yeah.
And hey, get over here. You can say hi. Come here. The girl's trying to say goodnight. You better say goodnight. You guys look away. Get over here. Give me.
All right, we're looking away.
They're looking away. They don't see you right now.
We'll do eyes closed.
Yeah, that's right.
Hey, look, give me a kiss. All right.
Tell her she's got to come introduce herself.
You're shy right now.
I've got a 7-year-old daughter and a 5-year-old daughter, and I mean, whenever there's people around, they literally back themselves into me to like give me hugs. Like, what kind of hug is this? I was like, no, I need around the neck, anaconda squeeze as much as you can, and quit wiping those kisses off your face because I'm going to keep giving it to you. That's what I tell them every day.
Well, if she decides to come back, Cory, she's welcome to sit down and talk with us as long as she wants to.
She's going to bed. I appreciate it, though.
Nice.
But I appreciate the story that you just shared, Cory, and I relate a lot to it. And I think in my world, especially when I look at my professional work, I'm that guy you're talking about, where I am quick to say, you know what, let's get it done right. I'm going to do it. And so what that does is that puts extra load on me. It takes away the trust that I have for people that I need to be pouring trust into, or maybe coaching, helping to grow to be able to do these things. And by me taking on an extra bandwidth, it can cause ripple effects that can have detrimental effects in other areas of our work. So I've really got to work on that, right? And so hearing you say that really resonated with me. But when I think about it, one of the reasons why I'm quick to do this, if you get down to my root issues, it's because of fear of criticism. I don't like to have mistakes happen that I get criticized on. So I'm like, let me grab it and take it on, right? I can only imagine being a professional athlete and you're being criticized in many cases constructively by coaches, but then let's just take on the whole media and just people like us that are watching on TV that me at 5'4.5", 125 pounds will watch you on TV and go, what is he doing? So how do you change that? How are you able to accept criticism and throw the bad away and maybe take the good and say, how can I learn and grow with it?
There's several different things you can do. One, we'll talk a little more about my faith in a little bit. I always believed in God. I didn't have an actual relationship with God till post football. And to me, I wish I did during football. Had a lot more active. I wish I was a lot more activated in my faith because Proverbs 3:5 was the first scripture to ever punch me in the mouth. It was trust in the Lord with all your heart and soul. Lean not on your own understanding. And I say, and so for me, I'm in the financial industry right now, so I sit down with a lot of people and talk about their family portfolios and the business portfolios, and there's tons of opportunity all over the place. And it's easy when you have potentially big client or something awesome sitting in front of you that you don't want to screw up, or you so desperately want to have. It's so easy to get caught up in your mind and to get over aggressive and to overthink and to get over into these places. And this is where my faith has helped me in a massive way. It is look, frankly, I just have conversations, and if I can bring something good to the conversation, God's going to bless that like crazy. And in the same way, in my football or in your sport, doesn't matter what your craft might be, but if you can bring that same kind of value, this co-op method of like, I know I'm good. I know this is competition, right? But if we're on a team, we're truly trying to work together on something. Right. My coach is for me, not against me. Then I can take a totally different perspective into this, right? If I fully believe in my heart of hearts that Sammy's for me as my coach and not against me, then I can walk and I can talk to him about any issues that I might be having on the job, right? And I can relinquish, there's that control people, but I can relinquish that control potentially and gain a pair of eyes and ears that I don't have for myself. You know, I'm limited in my own capacity, but if I can talk to you guys and be like, man, I want to do my best, and I feel like I'm not there right now. Or maybe I feel good about where I'm at, but I want to make sure that nothing's missing, and that there's something that I'm not seeing. And so, knowing that you're on my team, like, Coach, what do you see right now that I could do better, or I could accentuate that plays to my strength, or what do you see that I can be? What do you see in me is going to ultimately lead me to a next level potentially? And when I can do that, one, you can imagine if an employee comes to you saying something like that, and you're like, you immediately want to be on his team because he respects your opinion. And so now we start building something totally different, right? Now, I obviously got to take that and try to implement it and get it done. But, that was such a huge kind of piece, thinking back in my playing days, is I was this totally coachable guy before, where I kind of let the politics get to me a little bit, and I tried to control everything. And so I played worse, and it was tighter, and I couldn't think as clearly. I couldn't move as fluidly. And so it affected me in such a huge way. And so I say, for anybody, if we're going into this game, if you can basically boil it down to giving everybody the benefit of the doubt, and that doesn't mean you got to be a nice guy, because look, we got to be aggressive, and we got to go get things, and we got to bust our butts for ourselves and our families, and we got to do it. Okay. That doesn't mean we take away aggression, but I can be aggressive for you just as much as I can be aggressive against you. And that's a huge piece.
We had a guy, Scott Linebrink, on our show last week, and he's a former Major League Baseball player, and he had an opportunity to train with some elite warriors from our military. And one of the takeaways that he talked about was when they said, instead of like be careful or be safe, they say be dangerous, and really take that attitude. And something that you said that Sammy and I talk a lot about, and we call it blind spots. Mm-hmm. And this is a difficult thing to do. I can talk about it, but it's a challenge for me to actually implement it. But when I do, it's such a game changer. But go to the people in your life, your coworkers, your family, your close friends, and ask them, what are my blind spots? What are things that you see that I'm not seeing? And you're actually openly asking to get criticized. But if you're doing it sincerely, and you realize that this is to make me better, stronger, or, to our conversation we just had, more dangerous, then what a huge attribute to have. And just that mindset really takes one of the first things you said, it takes a lot of confidence. It comes with a lot of preparation, but such a game changer.
Man, that's good. I like that. What are my blind spots? I wrote that down. We don't think about that, man. Yeah. And I get it. Listen, I want to be the guy with all the answers. You come to me for business, I want to be the guy who's got it all for you. Right? I want to be your fix. I used to call myself a Leatherman tool, because I could do a whole lot for the football team. I was all the different positions, but I want to be that fix. And absolutely, I have been equipped to be an absolute wrecking ball for my family and myself, and for everybody around me. I have been equipped to that, but I am limited in my own power. Mm-hmm. And having a confidence in your walk, but knowing that allows me to speak to people. Now, they got to be the right people, right? But allows me to speak to people to gain a higher sense of understanding, a higher wisdom that I didn't have before. And that's huge. That's so big. I like that, man. Find your blind spot.
It's one of the most humbling exercises, because it comes directly from a great place when you go to the right people. And so and that's the thing. It's like we talk a lot about like having your board of directors, having the people that around you that are going to be able to impact your life, and they're going to give you the right guidance. We talk a lot about mentorship and having those brilliant people around you. So yeah, it's the first time you do it, it's so nerve wracking. But then whenever you get that great advice back, and it's something that typically it's something that like there's a couple of things that you just kind of have hanging in the back of your mind, and they nail it, and you're like, you know what, I knew that, but I just didn't want to admit it. But then sometimes there's that big blind spot that's like back here that you're never going to see. And those are the fun ones to kind of dissect and take apart and work on too. So it takes some different skill sets, but yeah, it's a lot of fun. But one of the things you mentioned there, and I want to transition to a little bit, we could talk about football all day long, and don't think we're not going to come back to talking about playing with some of the characters that you played with there during your time with Dallas, because I mean, you had the thunder and lightning combo there for a little bit with Barber, and who was it, Jones, I think, was there for a while too. And when we met so I'll go back to the origin story real quick. So I actually met you random chance. You were working with a company and you were delivering a product. It was a energy drink product to just a random gym that I happened to be working out in like 5 a.m. in the morning or something like that. And I recognized you because, again, I watch all linemen. And I was like, oh, that guy used to play for the Cowboys. And here you are delivering stuff. You talked to us for a little bit, you had a great handshake, and then like you're just genuinely a nice guy. Fast forward maybe 11 years. No, maybe about 10 years. I don't know. Fast forward to about 3 weeks ago, or 2 months ago, whatever it was.
Call it a decade.
Yeah, let's call it a decade. We just happenstance crossed paths at a little get together that I was having with some of my board of directors that I sit with, and those are some good friends and business partners that we worked with through some different business networking meetings. And you happen to know one of the guys that I'm really close with, and he happens to be really close with you. So long story short, the universe has a way of like connecting everybody together. And putting us back on the same path. But one of the things that we've done is we sat down and had our kind of afternoon happy hour, get to know each other. And you talked about your life after football. You started talking about Pro Capital. So would love you to give our audience just a little snippet, maybe that elevator pitch about what you do, and then kind of a little bit about why you do it. And then we can dive in a little bit more about some of those bigger questions that we had outlined for you.
Sure. Yeah. No, after football, finished my degree, went into a sales gig for a little while, and actually it was a great season for me. But ended up shifting to the financial industry and started up my own company called Pro Capital Wealth Management. And all that is I'm an independent advisor, wealth advisor. And so I'll cover the protection pieces. So you'll talk about life insurance or long-term care or disability into brokerage accounts, like a lot of retirement accounts, IRAs, Roth, retail accounts, some institutional stuff where I'll work with some businesses into alternative investments. And so I'll do a lot of retirement planning, a lot of management of assets, and basically helping people make right financial choices. And so the reason I got into it was my life was an example of it. Before, kind of coming from a crazy childhood, I ended up being really frugal in my life, and for whatever reason, and there's other reasons that I don't necessarily want to share with everybody, but I just didn't spend, and I didn't want to spend, and for some reason I kind of had this grasp on it. I still remember going to prom. I worked at a Texaco in high school and getting those paychecks, and they went, man, I didn't spend any of that money. Went all into my bank account, and we went to prom. had my date, got a $5 bowl of clam chowder, and I did not know what market price meant at the time.
Oh, hello.
Yeah. And so I ordered this steak and lobster thinking that sounds pretty good. And it comes out like $75 for my meal at the time. And I still remember, it still hurts me that.
Yeah.
And so it was funny because when I got into the league, I never starved. I've never had any issues, always been provided for. But when I got in the league, I didn't spend it all. And so man, every dime went in my savings account at first. And I still remember my apartment, my old neighbor, Jerry, I'd watch his dog for him, and he gave me his old table. He gave me his old chair. And I have this 1-bedroom apartment with a case of water and ketchup. And that was it. Lived the bachelor life, right? And I always tell people I didn't spend money till I got married. That was it. But, listen, I provide the vision. She provides the expansion. And that's what it's a massive deal. But, my own life, because I was a frugal person, ended up getting hooked up with an advisor through another player. She did a fantastic job with me. I wasn't afraid to poke her to death with questions. And even if they were stupid, and as a happenstance, she learned me up about my own stuff. And what happened was, I put the bulk of my money to work. And so I tell people, look, I'm over 10 years removed from the NFL, and I'm way better off today than I ever was playing football. And financially speaking, and that's from growth of the market. That's from me staying in the green and not going crazy with my money. But it allowed, what was so cool about that is it allowed for transition time. When I got hurt in the NFL, I had 7 different surgeries after that. So I was on the couch for the next year and a half plus, and trying to train to come back the year after that. And it had some workouts, but it didn't happen. And so I ended up going back to school before I ever got that first job. So we're sitting there 3 years without any income to do anything, basically. And so what I did in those initial years playing allowed me to have a transition time that was not, where money wasn't a problem in it, right? And so even though that was a big chunk of time, today that still hasn't affected me. That loss of income in those 3 years. And so what's cool is, I've been able to come into people's lives, and this is what's so neat about you're talking about giving up control and realizing that you do have blind spots, is I can come into a conversation very plainly, and we sit here and talk, and we might talk through ideas about the portfolio, and talk ideas or maybe their past experience with other advisors or money in general and what it means for their family. And we can project vision, we can get goals in their life. And I can share with them, listen, I'm here, I can give you all kinds of ideas. I can tell you what to do. And some people tell me what to do or just say, go with it. And that's cool. But a lot of people want to have a conversation about it, and they want to be involved, even though they might not know much about it. And I love to encourage that because, when we have the majority of our country lives paycheck to paycheck, doesn't have $400 in the bank for an emergency. The top 20% of our federal tax bracket pays 87% of our income taxes in America. It's so lopsided, but it's not lopsided because the rich are bastardizing the poor. It's because people are not exercising basic behaviors in the financial life. And you could say, and a lot of them just don't know because they don't know.
Exactly.
So they're caught in this perpetual cycle. Well, I came from one where I was like, I saw some things that I didn't want. And so I changed it. And it ended up setting my wife and I up on a massive, I don't want to say pedestal, but it set us up for a massive spot to be able to do what we wanted in life when we wanted to do it. And so when I have these conversations with people, man, there's some basic practices, yeah, but in the end, your relationship with money is what's going to drive your desire. Everything around it, money ends up being a side effect of you. And so you guys know this. We're talking, Sammy, we're talking, there's one guy in the school, one guy's just like trying businesses left and right. And I'm like, man, that's pretty crazy. Right? So he's trying business left and right. And he's open about what he's doing, what he's got, what's going on.
Yep.
And I love that, because the guys that are truly authentic in that walk, in that path, the people that have made it down the line further than them, they see that. Mm-hmm. and they want to help them. And then all of a sudden, things start blowing up. And so it happens even with me when we're having conversations, is I can share that. Listen, have you done this? Have you tried this? What's going on with your life? What's going on here? And once in a while, if they weren't a referral and somebody's investigating to me, and they're like, well, I'm talking to you and a couple other advisors, what makes you different? And I'm like, man, I'm not perfect. And I can share that. And I do not make every perfect move. I've made plenty of mistakes, and I've made mistakes in my own portfolio. But I can tell you, because I've been on the client side, I've been on the professional side. I'm not afraid to ask for people who've been down further than I have, who I look up to in a big way, who are qualified to talk to me, right? Who I vet them out. I allow that into my life, and because those factors play in, my life has been an explosion of good. And I can share that with people, and it doesn't mean that they go with me, right? Everybody's a little different and has a different fit, but it I tell you what, it allows that conversation to open up a whole lot more true. And then it allows me to be totally content with whatever the outcome is. And so I tell you what, it makes for a whole lot better transition, where I am not selling myself at all. I'm really trying to be a good add-on into your conversation and into your life. And if I can do that, man, awesome things will happen. I know it already has happened, and it'll continue to happen. So
one of the chapters in our book, just to point out, is all about financial literacy. And you nailed a lot of the things that we talk about in the book as well. And well, I'll save my key point for one of my key takeaways here a little bit later, and I'll let Greg ask the question. But yeah, I think that you just spouted so much knowledge that people were to just listen to that little segment right there again, and have that mindset into everything they're doing. I think it would really help them out just in life in general.
Yeah. And Cory, one of the questions that I'd put down to ask you before we started talking, you've already answered. And that question is, what are some of the bigger mistakes that people make in terms of their money? And I think what you just said over the last 3 or 4 minutes was just incredible. So I'm going to change my question up a little bit. And maybe it's not so much of a question, but a statement. And I'd just like to get your thoughts on it. But am I correct? And do you see the majority of people that aren't following what you just said, there's a fear or a lack of understanding of maybe an ignorance with money. And there's a reluctancy to admit that, to say, I don't know what to do with my money. And there's a bridge that's keeping somebody from going to somebody like you to say, hey, I need help. I don't know this. Instead, I'm just going to keep with my own, what I've been doing. I'm going to put money in my bank here. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. But they don't seek that advice, because with money in this world, it's something that we're so afraid to admit what we make, what we don't make, or how we spend our money. Just what are your general thoughts on that? Is that something you even think is relevant? Am I on the right track at even kind of hypothesizing that? Or what do you see with people?
I mean, absolutely. What's the basis of this podcast? The pursuit of growth. How many people actually pursue that?
Right.
Not very many.
Very few.
And there's lots of different reasons, right? I could be comfortable in my life and I don't want to move. Right? I could, and really that's an excuse. That's all it is.
Exactly.
But there's this fear or this tension that you're faced with all of a sudden when you got to walk into that unknown.
That's the word I was looking for, is tension. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, no, it's, you know how it is. First time we meet, is there a tension? Absolutely.
Absolutely.
We've never met each other before. Now I'm like, now there might be all kinds of thoughts. I got to go through the surface level questions. Where are you from? What do you do? Do you have a family? Yeah. And I'm like, and so until you hit a point where all of a sudden something real happens in the conversation, and And when those are those points that you live for, because those are the ones that stick with you, right? And so all of a sudden, this is what I like about these conversations is okay, I'm not afraid to go talk to somebody who's been down that road, right? Like we have these big conversations, and I remember there's so many people that want to talk about, the rich need to pay their fair share. Well, do you know how they got there in the first place? Let's talk about that first before we talk about fair share, which is a trigger word, by the way.
I don't believe in fair.
And so but what happens is so many people cower away from this tension or from this tough place to go into, or this honestly a truthful conversation with yourself that you are not what you think you are. Mm-hmm. You are not. And this is what we're talking about, like realizing that I'm not the guy with every answer. And when I can realize that I'm not the guy with every answer, there's that give up of control. And so we all want control of this life so much that we're not willing to put down that veil of a lie that I got it all together. And so people are afraid of that tension. Because they're afraid of that tension, they never face it. And so instead of facing it, I can place blame in all kinds of other places. Mm-hmm. And I can walk in one of the worst things you could ever say to anybody who's been down a successful path. And I've had this only a couple times, and the people never showed up in my house again, is when they walk into your house, they say, man, what do they say? Something like, must be nice. And something to that effect. You want to get a highway ticket out of my life? That's one of the first ways to do it.
Yeah, it's a mindset, right?
It's totally the mindset. And you're like, and so what it is like, hold up, you don't realize the value that you bring to this table right now. So you're too insecure and you want to try to beat down mine. And I'm going to tell you, people, the same thing. I reshared it something this morning. Everybody wants to be where the goal is, and nobody ever wants to join the journey to get there.
Right.
All right. Right. But the journey is the place that is where it qualifies you to have a seat at the table at the goal. And if you're not willing to jump in and work and be a part of that process, you're never ever going to get to where you want to in the first place. And that's what I love about people who have made it, who have had to come through some sort of trash to get to where they're at. Right. And it could be all kinds of things. It could be like my second or third marriage, which I hate people having to go through divorces or any sort of place like that. But it could be to this place where I've walked through enough sludge in my life where I got to this place emotionally where I was fed up and I was sick of my own trash that I was walking through.
Right.
And I finally decided to change. And so I did it enough and I grew enough and it compounded enough in my life that I got to this level of attainment where I could see you and I could see where you were at in your level. And I could pretty well assume that you have busted your ass to get to that same kind of place. And if I come into a place where, like, instead of walking to the house and I say, man, must be nice. Instead of that, where I've come in and I'm like, man, you build a badass life for yourself.
Right.
I'm like, I would love to go have coffee with you and to pick your brain and see where that came from.
Sammy and I talk a lot about, right now we're in the middle of COVID-19, right? But the biggest virus that's destroying this world is victim mentality. And it goes exactly what you just talked about. And it's always people looking for the negative or always trying to find like what you said earlier, this isn't fair, or this person had this opportunity, that's why they got there. Instead of looking at me and like, I love what you just said. I want to go have coffee with this guy and learn what he did. I want to learn how I can grow, how I can get better, how I can surround myself. We've all got different journeys. And when you can look at your trash in your life with gratitude and being like, I went through this, but this is what I learned from it. And this is how it sharpened and made me better. Man, that's when you get on a whole different playing field. And it pains me that so few people choose to think that way. And that's a part of what Sammy and I are all about, is trying to just get people to change. It's one of my takeaways. I'll tell you already. You talked about perspective earlier, and it's just changing that perspective and what it can do for your life and the life of others. Man, I got chills. I love everything you just said, man.
Good.
One of the things that I know we're running up a little bit against time, but I really want to touch on something that I know is very important to you, and that is your faith. You know, you use your platforms to express your faith, and there's a whole chapter in our book about faith. And the whole thing about the book and the whole thing about the pursuit of growth is just that. It's like, you know, you'll find people that are at the start of their journey, wherever it may be: financial literacy, hobbies and experiences, health, wellness, some of the different sections we talked about. But the one about faith too is something that can also sometimes be that conversation that people don't want to have. We're talking about money, right? Some people don't want to have those conversations. Some people talk about their faith, some people don't. But I know that you express yours quite adamantly everywhere you are, and it's a fabric of who you are. So talk a little bit about how faith has played a role in your career kind of back then, what you said, you know, you kind of didn't really have a strong faith back then, but talk about how it was then and how it is now.
Yeah, no, you know, growing up, we were in and out of the church a lot. I grew up Mormon, and in and out of the church a lot, and that was kind of moving back and forth between parents a lot. And I had a faith, like I believed in God, and definitely had some spiritual experiences. But it's not like I desired it, right? It's not like I really craved for it. So like we talk about going after growth. How many people crave that? Not very many people crave that. And so because, you know, it wasn't real to me, not necessarily wasn't real, but it wasn't something that I was going after in my life. It wasn't anything big in my life. And so a lot of times, you know, God will grab people in different ways. And for a lot of people who are going to be as hard-headed as I can be, you know, typically it's clipping your wings somehow. And so two things happened in my life. One was a lot bigger than the other, but one was when I got hurt when I played in Miami, and I ruptured my patellar tendon. It ended up getting infected. I had 5 surgeries on that knee. Ended up taking care of my
that's
shoulder.
a knee, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, the tendon goes through your quad, through your largest leg muscles, right, top of your leg, through your kneecap in the front of your shin. And we were playing Miami one night on a short screen. I was starting at center, a second series of the game, and I was pursuing Urlacher, over pursued him, and he came underneath me. And when I planted to try to come back to him, my kneecap split in half. And so it was a non-contact injury. And it's funny because sometimes when I get into it and I tell that story from the stage, you know, I'm like, you know, I went up there and the guy was trying to block his Brian Urlacher, and then I'll just kind of sit, and people think, like, they stop for a second. They're like, "Did you die?" And I'm like, "Well, no, I'm right here. I'm alive right now." So they think they always let out this big gasp or something. So, but what happened was, all of a sudden, you know, I'm hurt. I'd always been relatively healthy before, and so now I'm all these surgeries. Megan and I got married during that time, and I'm trying to fight. I had never any doubt that I was ever going to come back to the league, and I had a handful of workouts, but it didn't happen, and didn't get signed, and so ultimately I had to face this fact that it wasn't happening, and so I just started moving for myself and for my family and my own life, and start making some moves. But that was a massive jar to me. And for anybody who's gone through some sort of life change like that, and there's a lot of similarities all around, that's a massive faith shaker, right? When you think you're made for something, and the people you're made for tell you that we don't need you anymore, that shakes you quite a bit. And that was the first one. So I'm walking, trying to figure out what the heck's going on in life. That's where Sammy and I met with the drink company that I worked with. But the second thing that happened was my brother lost his son to cancer. And I'm middle of 3 boys. My younger brother and his wife, their son passed right before his 2nd birthday. Our daughter Grace, I was trying to kiss that. She's 6 now. She was born during that. First time they got to meet was at St. Jude. And when the doc told him to take him home. And so, like a lot of people, when death hits family, it can cause cracks to turn to craters. And a lot of crazy and selfish things come out during that time, me included. And so we go through this. And so we got to a place where we were a very big F you to God.
Yeah, bitter.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
And so I kind of go to my natural control place where I'm like, you don't want to do this. You want to take this perfect gift? Fine. I don't need you. I'll go take care of it myself. Right. I still had that big chip on my shoulder. And that's where I say part of me respects that to a great degree, because we need activators. We need guys who are willing to go take a load. But if we're trying to take the entire thing, it's going to crumble. And ultimately, you know, those kinds of things, what started happening, and this is where the enemy, this is where Satan, this is where a bad spirit really tries to work into you and get you alone during these time frames. And I'll tell you, like, when I started going down into this, I really started having some pretty horrible thoughts. You know, and maybe you guys have had some of these things where, like, we're walking in Walmart and I don't like the way you look, whatever reason. And so I had this whole vision of just bashing your head into the corner of this shelf right now.
Yeah.
And I would have some of these things, and other, like, even suicidal thought processes where you're like, it'd be really easy just to cross the lane right now. And so some of these things were coming at me, and it was really messing with me a whole lot. And I'm here to tell you, one, if anybody's having this or listening to this right now, that's not your voice. That's the enemy's voice trying to plant. His only job is here to steal, kill, and destroy. And that's him trying to plant voices into your head to try to destroy your life. And that's not your voice. But what had happened with me, thank goodness, is we had made some incredible friends, and a lot of different reasons things happened. But we got an invite over to Milestone Church here in Keller, Texas, and walked in. I'm full guard up, ready to basically fight you as a pastor, right? I'm like, I didn't care. I had to fight against God. And the only reason I'm there is because my wife said she was going and I could go if I wanted. And I'm like, basically, like, that's like, it's not an ultimatum, but it's like, are you going to man up and be with me or and be my husband or not? And so I'm like, you know, you get all flipped out and just, fine, I got to go.
Yeah. But I'm not tucking in my shirt. Yeah.
That's a good one.
But we go in, and it's funny, they've changed buildings now. They've exploded in growth, but they were in an old grocery store here in Keller, and behind the Taco Casa that we went to a whole lot of times. And so, when I walk in, I'm holding Grace when she's a baby. I got my wife, Megan, and we walk in. The pastors are trying to greet you and say, you know, be all nice to you. And I'm like half kicking them in the face. I'm like, get out of my face. I don't want to talk to you. And then, you know, the kids ministry, they're like, hey, we can take your baby. I'm like, this is mine. Don't touch. And we go in and we're sitting down. We had some friends that invited us, so we're sitting down with them, and we go into the worship portion of it. And I come from this Mormon background, was very conservative, wind instruments only. Different. Right. And I'm like super judgmental walking into this thing, you know, this is not even how it's done. Whatever. I'm like, who am I to come in and judge this crap?
Yeah.
And
I get
it. I was raised Catholic. I know how it goes.
Exactly.
Raised Southern Baptist here. So yeah, I definitely know what you're talking about.
Well, it was funny. So, all right, we come in, and it's about the second or third worship song. I'm just listening. I'm just there. I'm just there. I don't care. I'm just there, checking the box for my wife right now. And it was about second or third worship song before God lays a vision of my nephew Evan sitting on his lap. And so it wasn't anything audible, but I had this overwhelming feeling of, I got him. He's good. And I don't tell people, look, there wasn't a moment. That wasn't the moment where I'm like, I'm giving my life to Christ. That brought down the wall enough to come back. And so, like, we left, and Megan was like, would you go back? And I'm like, yeah, whatever, you know. And I didn't tell anybody about that for a long time. But what started happening, Romans, it talks about to gain faith. In order to gain faith, like you ask somebody, how can they not have faith? It's because maybe they haven't been in an environment to get it. Well, to gain faith, we have to hear the word and the word of Christ. And so if you're not in an area where God can operate on you, right, there's no way we can accelerate our faith in our life. And all of a sudden, I'm in this environment where I'm hearing the message. I'm hearing what God's got in our life, and our pastor is awesome. And so he's big old bald dude like me, and so he totally speaks in and makes scripture practice what it is today, talking about a handshake and looking a guy directly in the eye and having a respect for his position and his title. A lot of different positions that I appreciate, the stuff that I held dear in my life, but tied it biblically to our faith. And so all of a sudden I'm in this environment where God can work on me. I can gain this faith. And this is what was so neat about it was for long, I'm in this, and then like several weeks, like probably like, I don't know, 15 weeks, we're showing up. I start taking notes because what he's got to say is actually pretty good, and this is what's happening is really the Spirit is drawing me in. It's trying to bring me into this conversation right now. And all of a sudden I get in a small group with guys, and then I get invited to a men's development group. And that's where it was this slow growth, but all of a sudden a fire was lit that had never been there before. I had never gone into football and wanted to consume and eat and see what you were doing to make me better. I never did. I did what I needed to do. I knew I was a hard worker. I knew the offense. I was smart. I was where I was supposed to be, when I was supposed to be there, but I didn't have a hunger for anything past that. And so when I'm in my men's development group, that's where it started out as assignment where, okay, we got to read a book, chapter, John Maxwell's 21 Irrefutable Laws of Growth.
Right.
And, or 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership.
Leadership, yeah.
Invaluable. Yeah. The 13 Invaluable Laws of Growth is one of his other ones.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden, I'm reading it as homework, right? Cramming like anybody else did to begin with. And I'm laying in bed next to Megan, and my mind is blowing up at some of this content. And I'm like, holy crap, babe. I'm like, listen to this. I'm reading it. Pretty soon she's telling me to shut up. She's like, I'm trying to go to bed. But this build happened where I had this, all of a sudden got a stupid appetite to eat. And all of a sudden, I am reading every possible book, listening to every podcast, listening to every message, TED Talk I can get my face into. And so this was at the very tail end of my time with that beverage company, Sammy. And so what started happening was I basically went into this hole where God could work on me. He turned on a light that caused me to eat, which caused my cup to overflow. So many people they struggle with what to deliver to their team. Leaders struggle to deliver to their team or maybe to the families because they have nothing to give them. You can't pour from an empty cup, right? And so all of a sudden I'm filling up, and I didn't realize what's happening, but I'm filling up in this insane way, which is basic information, revelation. I'll throw another shun in there, inspiration, whatever you want. But like, all these things start happening to me, and all right, you and I go to coffee, and something that I would read would come right back into our conversation that we were talking about, and it made me look really good. And so I started getting invited to speak, and it started with men's groups. It started, you need to talk to my buddy, to all the way up to men's conferences, to international deals. Like, I'm like, what the heck? I remember one of my biggest ones was a Stronger Men's Conference up in Springfield, Missouri for, I'm blanking on the church name, but there was 8,000 guys was the audience.
Wow.
I'm sharing with. And then it's taken me to Israel for a men's conference over there, and Barcelona right before the shutdown happened for another Faith Talk with a football team. I'm like all over the map with all these kind of different things. And I'm sitting there like, what's funny is that people are like, man, you got a lot of good things to say. And I sit here and say it. I'm like, it's not me. It's not me at all. It's so cool because this got turned on into me. And so all of these awesome things started following it in my life. And that's cracks that turned into craters in my family got smoothed over. Not all of them. It's not perfect, right? But all of a sudden, I got a relationship with my older brother that was really cracked hard when we lost my nephew. All of a sudden, I got other friends coming back into my life, or I got even coaches that, you know, I felt like God turned my perspective around to a place where he was like, they're not against you, man. I'm trying to bring you through this. I'm trying to make you see something. And all of a sudden I can come back to somebody and apologize for something that I was being a dick in, you know? And so I could come into that, and you could legit see relationships or situations take a complete 180. And so not everybody has to agree with where I'm at. I'm okay with that. Scripture is not what got me. God is what got me. And when people get sideways, is they're like, man, how can you read from a book that was written by me? I get it. Logically, you can kind of go through these things and have a ton of great questions, and they're valid questions. But they're like, how can you do this? And how can you read that and believe any of that stuff? And I'm like, I didn't really read that and believe it at first. It wasn't that got me. It's what God ran into me with. Like he met me before I believed any of that stuff to begin with. And I tell you, if you can get into an environment where God will hit you and you actually have a surrender where you're like, I'm giving up this control. What do you want from me on this? As immature as it might sound, I can even cuss at this guy and he's okay with it. And is you know, immature as that might sound, if you can come to him and be like, what do you want from me out of this? And you kind of have this physical drop. You guys have had this before where you just like throw your hands up. You're like, I give up. You watch, and he'll do it in his own way, but he will meet you in those moments when you actually do that with him. And then you get into an environment where you can hear that word and you have eyes to see and ears to hear. And it ends up being this most powerful thing in my life, because now I'm opening up vision for my life. He's showing me things in my past that I've never seen before, right? That I didn't look at the right way. Moments that were explosive moments. The first time I got invited to play football. How big a deal is that? Where the guy unlocked a gift into my life that ultimately would lead to an NFL career, to meeting my wife, to having my children, to having my business, to be sitting talking with you guys right now, right? Explosive moments to realize, holy cow, how powerful can I be right now, to being able to project vision for my future, to ultimately give a massive leadership position for my family, and to lead them into strength and not into a destructive place where most of this world wants to be. And I tell you right now, most people, they don't prepare for bad times. And I'm thankful God hit me right there, because now I have a totally different drive and intentionality in my life. And I'll speak on marriage in big ways, because my parents had a big breakup in that time of my life, and it was very significant to me standing out. But you know, we have a 50% divorce rate. You know, your subsequent divorces after the first divorce go straight up, even as much to the fourth divorce has an over 76%.
I was going to say, I think I've read it's 80%. Yeah. It's crazy. It's crazy.
And so I came into this marriage with a whole different perspective, with a willingness to fight. And I don't know about anybody that goes into a venture or a relationship, or especially a marriage, that has a half a chance of surviving. But when you don't prepare for bad times and you don't equip yourself with somebody who's a lot more powerful than you are, that's what you're leaving yourself up to. And I'm not, that's why I love sharing with people who, guys that have struggled coming out of marriage. I'm usually the wrong guy to talk to. They don't want to hear from me, because I'm just giving some things straight up. But I love talking to people who just get engaged. I encourage them to go into premarital counseling on purpose. I go, you need to arm yourselves up before you go into this thing, because if you don't, you're going to be left up to half a chance, and you don't want to be hating each other at the end of this, wondering why in the world, and how in the world did we get here, and how come I didn't send a mayday out before the plane crashed? That's a big deal. So, and I'll tell you, my faith has been such a critical piece of every facet of my life in that. And I still don't get it right all the time, right? I'm not perfect by any stretch. I am very much imperfect, but it is a critical piece to keeping me focused and to keeping me vision bound. Because ultimately, I tell you what, you want to wreck a marriage, a guy, you want to wreck a marriage, stop leading your wife. Mm-hmm. You want to wreck something, stop leading your wife. You want to wreck something, start turning yourself into the center of attention all the time. You want an awesome one that I love is a proverb that says, a man who finds a wife finds favor in the Lord. So there's two big critical pieces in that. One, a man who finds a wife, that means you have to find her. You have to be actively on the pursuit of her, not just to find, right, not just to find her as a wife, but you have to find her in your home. Meaning, I don't come home and I don't say, why don't you pursue me once in a while? Why don't you come jump on me in bed once in a while? Why don't you try to turn me on once in a while? It's all of a sudden, it's not on you. It's not on her. It's on you as the man. Right? A man who finds a wife finds favor in the Lord. And the second part of that is the woman holds the favor factor. Right? Man provides the vision. She provides the expansion. In the same way, I bought this house, but she's the one who turned it into a home. I buy the groceries, but she's the one who turns it into a meal. I provide a seed. She's the one that makes it a human. And so when you start hearing these pieces and you start getting real perspective into this, the way God has created us very intimately for a purpose. And when you lock him out of your purpose for your life, that's when you're inviting destruction in. And I'll tell you a big one that I have a heart on is for transgenders right now. Mm-hmm. People are in this place. I think the rate was a 41% suicide.
Yeah.
That's insane. And politically speaking, we want to blame it on bullying. We want to blame it on whatever, right? But it hurts that somebody might have been in this at some point where we didn't have somebody strong enough in their foundation to tell them, no, you're not that.
Yeah.
God made you absolutely specifically for a purpose. And I tell you, when you start operating in that and when you pursue him in that and what that's supposed to be, he gets intimate with you in it. And he will call you specifically into areas you're supposed to be in. And it changes the game for your life. Changes. You get way more intentional when you get, and I don't, people can bash me all they want, right? People call me jerk. My wife calls me a jerk sometimes. So I got to listen to her. But I tell you what, I am not going down in this world crashing. My wife and my family is not going down crashing and burning in this world because of my lack of intentionality or my lack of voice or my lack of movement to make something happen in their life and to make sure God is a part of it. And I would hope people would take it as a warning. That if you try to control everything in your own life, you're going to lead a pretty terrible life. And you're going to live with a whole lot of angst.
Hey, Sammy?
Yeah.
Sorry.
How awesome was the last 10 minutes?
I could have just muted myself and I physically did because, I mean, you don't understand like a lot of the stuff that we've talked about in so long. Not only that, I literally just drew a circle, if you see that little note right there, because I think you did such a great job of highlighting that full perspective. It's perspective, and I put a circle right there, because that's a lot of the similar things that we talk about and we discuss and we drive other people to talk about as well. And we started this because of those types of conversations that we had with each other.
Yeah, and Cory, I'm going to put you on the spot right now. So we're at the point of the show where we're going to start wrapping up and kind of coming to our close, but we have to have you come on again because I feel like we've just scratched the surface in all three of those conversations. And I've got so many things. I'm like, I want to just talk to you for like the next 4 or 5 hours right now and so many different things. And quite also, another area that we didn't get to is we got to talk music next time.
Oh, yeah.
Because Sammy and I are big music dorks. We used to play in a band together. So we've got to talk about free reign the next time that you come on. But with that, we're at the point where we start wrapping up the show. And this is my favorite part because it gives Sammy and I a chance to share back what we learned from you. And it's also probably the hardest part of the conversation for us because like Sammy, I've got page and a half of notes that I don't know how I'm going to come up with 3 takeaways again. But before we get to our takeaways, we have a question that we want to ask you. And quite honestly, you've answered this just through the conversation. So you can either reiterate something you've already said, or if there's something new that just pops into your head, please share it. But we ask every guest on this show, when we ask the question, can you share some tactical advice or lessons learned, or maybe some wisdom that has really impacted you, that's made an impact in your life? What's the first thing that comes to your mind? What would you share with our audience?
A piece in me that I really appreciate as men. There's a big one that I kind of constantly come back to, and it sits on the a man who finds a wife portion. As men, I'm an activator through and through. I'd much rather play than watch. And to be honest, that's how we're all wired a little different, right? But as men, that's how we're wired. Our masculinity is strength and action. And I steal that from John Eldridge. And it's something, and actually I got one of my favorites. I'll read you. My wife read this from his book, Captivating. And the reason she read that is she's also starting to read Wild at Heart. I've read that 3 times, and she finally got it recommended from another friend at church, because we had a boy, and she was like, you need to read that to understand him. So,
yeah.
But what's funny was she read, it was cool. She started reading, joined me in the mornings to read. And so I get up at 5 every morning, and I just got to have a time where it's intentional growth time for me. Like, I got to read, I got to eat somehow, and it'll come out throughout the day. And so anyways, she was reading with me, and she read this. She was reading about, and they hit on his book, which he co-wrote with his wife, this one passage. Oh, and he was talking about women a little bit, and like the beauty of women was celebrated everywhere, hundreds of times over, in paintings, sculptures, and there's a reason for this. For one thing, men look ridiculous lying on a bed, buck naked, half covered with a sheet. Right? Because it doesn't fit the essence of masculinity. Something in you wants to say, get up already and get a job. Cut the grass, get to work. For Adam is captured best in motion, doing something. His essence is strength and action. That is what he speaks to the world. He bears the image of God, who is a warrior. On behalf of God, Adam says, God will come through. God is on the move. That is why a passive man is so disturbing. His passivity defies his very essence. It violates the way he bears God's image. A passive man says God will not come through. He is not acting on your behalf. And I would think, like, the takeaway I have, I've taken over some divorcees this last year. COVID has just ramped that stuff up crazy.
Yeah.
When you don't know, you don't know. If you don't know you're supposed to be an activator, you don't know you're supposed to be on the move somehow, even if it's the wrong direction, you do more damage by doing nothing than you do by doing the wrong thing. And if you don't know that, you'll sit and spin in the same spot, meanwhile never doing anything to build your own life or your families. And I've taken over some divorcees this last year, some ladies, that it's been pretty dang heartbreaking when they were the ones who filed for divorce, thinking that was what was going to be the catalyst to move him off the couch.
Yeah. Wow.
And it wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
And they're breaking down because all they want him to do is fight for the marriage and fight for the relationship. And here's this lady thinking that she is not worth fighting for because the guy's not getting off his ass. And I'll tell you what, I come back to this over and over and over again, because we have a natural nature of guys. Like, we want to be aggressive. We want to be doing these things. We act in that, and that's great. But we also have a natural destructive path to not do anything at times. When we don't know what to do, we'll just stop. And so a lot of guys sit in that path, And because of that, they bring destruction to their life, and they don't know how to express it. I don't know what to say. I don't know what you want from me. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I'm going to work, right? I can try to control what I can do at work because I know what kind of predictability that has potentially. And so I'll just dive into that instead of this, where this is this darkness and confusion type of a place. And I'm telling you what, one of the best things that happens at the beginning of the very first verses of Genesis is when it talks about the Spirit of God hovering over the waters.
The water, yeah.
And the earth was void at the time, meaning it was dark. Mm-hmm. There was nothing happening. They had no idea where to go. And the next verse was, all he said was, let there be light. And then there was light. And I tell you, when he created Adam and he told Adam to name the animals, he didn't tell him what to name them. He just said, name them. Adam didn't check with God to say, hey, does this look like a penguin to you? Right? He didn't say that. No, God told him to name it. That means that's a whole world of confusion. I don't know what I'm going to do, but just go. Whatever you do, don't sit. Go. And I'll tell you what, your family will come with you. And they will follow you into that fight. And if you build them up along that path and along that walk, they will be absolutely dressed up badass warriors just like you.
I love it.
And that's the coolest thing you could ever have. One of my favorite, I'm sorry, I can go on, but like one of my most favorite scenes is in the movie 300, right? Right before he kicks the dude in the pit.
Yep.
Right when he looks back at his queen, like just to check with her.
Mm-hmm.
Like he looks back, he's like almost like you'd see him saying, babe, you okay with this right now?
And she just kind of gives him the,
oh my, how hot is that?
Yeah.
How hot is that, dude?
Dude,
like she just gives him the nod.
Sparta is all I gotta say for that, right? Dude, that's one of the greatest scenes in the history of cinema, bar none.
You're right, and it's that subtle. That's something that I didn't tell Greg, is that Cory's also a huge movie buff. So yeah, that's another thing. We can go line for line on many things. So that's definitely, we're going to cue you up on that too. We want to be real respectful of your time. So the last question that we have, and then we'll give our 3 takeaways each, is the very last one is a question we like to ask people. So take yourself now, today, and remember back when you were little, and you might have done this as a grade school experiment. You would, teacher would bring out a box, you'd write a momentum or a note to yourself, put it in a box and bury it in like a time capsule. And you're going to open it up in 10 years. And you would open that up and you'd see your advice. If you could go 10 years into the future and tell yourself some advice, what would you tell yourself?
Man. That's a tough one. That's a hard one.
The twist on that question, Cory, is because so many times people are asked, what would you go back and tell yourself 10 years ago, right? Mm-hmm. But what about the future? And like for me, when I'm asked that question, I would tell myself a lot of what you just talked about.
Yep.
Keep growing. Don't get passive. Don't get comfortable. That's my answer, because I feel like so often our desires in life are to pursue a place of comfort.
I'm plugging in. I hear you. I'm plugging into the computer. That's all.
Yeah, I think that's the ass backwards way of going about it. I think we should be pursuing the challenges in life and the hard things. Comforts are a blessing. We should love comforts. We should embrace them. But man, that shouldn't be our ultimate goal. And so my advice to myself is, Greg, keep grinding. Don't let up.
Man, that's good. I was sitting here, I was trying to think of like where I was at. And, I was just kind of this chubby kid. I'm like, I always had a good attitude, I guess. But I get like anybody who's, especially like middle school, or you're coming through into adolescence, or trying to shift, right? Well, thanks, babe. Come on. She brought me some water.
Look at that.
Come on. I guess when you're coming through that time where you're trying to figure who the heck you are, guidance can be so crucial, right? And so, I'm like, I don't know, as you were talking, you're sharing that, I'm sitting there thinking about how tough it was going through all those moves. I went through 7 different schools in a 4-year time period at that point, and so maybe a lot of friends and we move and stuff, but like what kind of resonated when you're sitting there was what came into my head was I see you, and I'm like, because I don't want to be corny with anything, but I think of God, like, okay, faith is such a crucial piece of what I'm doing now, or what I am now, but it wasn't necessarily then. But the cool thing about God is, this guy, he's omnipotent, omnipresent. I don't know if I ever say it right. Omniscience, right? He is everything, all things, and he's Lord over everything. But what he chooses to identify with is a father, and I tell you what is that's why coaches were so crucial to me. But if I could look back, if I could give something back to them, it's encouragement that you're seeing, like I see you, and one of my favorite verses is when John the Baptist baptizes Jesus. And it was one of the only few audible times God speaks in the Bible, and he says, "This is my son, for who I'm well pleased." Am I missing a part on that?
I think you hit it.
I think, yeah, this is my son, for who I'm well pleased. And so I sit here and think about, like, when so many of us are struggling with our identity and like what we're supposed to be doing on this planet. When he does that, when he says, "This is my son," when you say that, I see you, you are my son, and you make me happy, you fill me with joy. That would be a pretty awesome thing. If it could hit me right then, you might not always catch an adolescent kid, he might just be thinking about sex all the time. I don't know. But if you could get a confused kid at that time where you can give them that, and I don't know how far it would resonate, but we're like, I see you, and you're okay, and you stay with me, son, and I got you. And I had one time I came in pretty messed up during high school. It was during I wrestled in high school, so it was during winter break. Everybody was gone. And during the holidays were always a hard time, and and for whatever reason, I didn't think I showed it, but I came in for practice, and my old coach Raul and Sarah, he passed away this last year, was this short little Greek jack dude. Half of what he said never made any sense, and so it's always fun. We're always chuckling after we left. Like,
we've all got friends like that, right?
Yep.
Yeah. But for whatever reason, he sensed something was wrong or off about me, and man, I still remember it. And I'm like, it's like going back to that moment. But says so, and he was like, "Come here," and he brings me into his office, and I just like broke down. This was like I want to say like my sophomore or junior year in high school. I just like broke down, and he just started talking to me, sharing me about his family, and like, again, it was probably the most nothing, like, if I couldn't get anything from it other than the feeling that he was looking after me, and that he saw me. And man, I tell you, it's like that kind of stuff. Like, if so many people are struggling with like what the heck they're supposed to be doing on this planet, I'm like, you are absolutely seeing, like, I see you. And if we can communicate that as image bearers of God, that we could wipe out the enemy in a big way.
Man, I love that. I love what you said. I see you. I got you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it's the same thing I just wrote. Yep.
Well, speaking of what we wrote, Sammy, you want to start off and share your 3 takeaways from the conversation?
I will. So my top 3 takeaways of this conversation it had to do with your progression of confidence. And I think I'm guilty of this, and I speak on this a lot. So I'm guilty of trying to eat 3 elephants in one bite. Forget just one, right? So the progression of confidence not only comes from patience, but also understanding that you need to look, you need to listen, and you need to learn. So I think that is one thing that really resonated with me. You also said this little phrase, give people the benefit of the doubt, but stay aggressive. And I think we led into that a lot in the faith talk, and a lot about the talk about masculinity as well, because I think it's a topic that we should talk about. I think as men, we should be able to have those conversations without fear of retribution as well. And the last thing is it's like a simple bit of advice, and we do talk about this in our book just a little bit, but a little bit different language, but exercising basic behaviors. I mean, there's so many little things that I know that you and I and Greg will have more conversations about this, but Greg knows this very well about me. It's like, I do those little things. I try and simplify down things to their most basic fundamental things that you can do, like literally laying my clothes out every single night in the order that I'm going to put them on so that I can hit my 5:30 a.m. workout. I put one sock in one shoe. I put the other sock in one shoe. I mean, I lay it all out and I regiment and I go back to basics. So I think more people need to do that as well, just in their everyday life. So Greg, those are my top 3. You go ahead, Greg.
Man, that's awesome. Cory, perspective is a choice. Man, that just hit me right in my face. Whether that's your professional life, your personal life, your financial literacy, every aspect of life that matters, perspective is a choice. And you can choose to be a victim, or you can choose to be aggressive, and you can choose to say, how am I going to use what I'm going after to serve others? Man, that fired me up. There's a saying that it's not in the Bible. A lot of times it's talked as if it's a scripture. At least as far as I know, it's not a scripture, but it's taken from scripture. And that is, the devil sits on an idle horse. And what that means is, it goes back to what you said about the passive man. And the passive man is opening himself up to so many negative circumstances and opportunities. And I love how you mentioned several times, arm yourself. And that is a mindset that men in our culture right now are drastically losing. And I think, especially in the world of faith, it's almost become, when you think of a man of faith, you think of a timid person who is, void of a lot of the things that we believe are important in masculinity. We need more men stepping up and sharing our faith. We need more men taking leadership roles in our church, in our communities. And I'm just going to give you a compliment, Cory. You're inspiring in how you're doing that. And very, very, very cool. And then my third takeaway can be applied to every single thing that we've talked about this entire hour and a half. And Cory, we went over tonight. So thank you for being patient with us.
Yeah.
But dude, you're too good.
You're good.
I can't stop you. You're too good. But you said, don't be afraid of someone who's been down that road. Dude, I'm writing that down. I have a list of quotes that I look at every single morning that are my affirmations, and that's going to go on to one of them. And it's a reminder to go to people who have strengths in different areas that you don't. It goes to areas of people that have strengths in areas that you do have strengths. But it's surrounding yourself with like-minded people and learn from them, grow from them, trust them, be accountable with them. But surround yourself with people who have been down that road, because together we're better than we are alone. But only if we surround ourselves by the right people, because your inner circle is so critical. And again, I could go on to, I got about 20 more, but we said we're going to do 3, and I'm gonna behave this time and just get to 3. But man, Cory, what a fantastic conversation tonight, man. This was I'm fired up right now.
I am too. And Cory, the last thing that we want to do for you as well is utilize our way to share what you've shared with us throughout the world. So also give people an opportunity, or give you a chance to kind of do that shameless plug, plug whatever you have right now, any websites, anything like that. I'm going to link everything in the notes, in the show notes, on the website, on the blog. But how can people get a hold of you?
Sure. My speaking, you can go to CoryProcter.com. If you're looking for the wealth management, ProCapitalTX.com. which I'm a geek on my site. I freaking love that thing right now. And there's a lot of good things on there.
We love the lion and the crown, like logo.
Right. Yeah. My buddy helped me make that, and he did an incredible job with that thing. But I love that. A lot of good resources there. If somebody's wanting to investigate me. But follow me on social. Excuse me. I've been a little light lately, but at Cory Procter for Twitter, for Instagram, Facebook, and I talk to me. Right. I'm pretty direct, so that's why I say some people could think I'm a jerk at first, but I'm okay with that. But come at me if you guys something's going on, you want to ask me a question. I'm happy to help wherever I can. And I say don't be afraid. If you're encouraged by listening to something like this and you have a question, do it now. Don't wait. And otherwise it'll fade and you won't get it done. And so I would encourage that. But yeah, I appreciate the plug. But here to help where I can, man. I'm thankful for you guys having me on. We can absolutely set up some more times and go deeper into some other areas. I got no problem with that.
That sounds great. Hopefully next time we can do it in person too. That'd be great.
We could do that.
Absolutely.
That's easy. I'm not afraid of COVID.
Hey,
I'm afraid of that.
We're ready to rock and roll, so we'll make that happen, man.
That's right.
Love it.
All right, Greg, why don't you take us home?
Yeah, well, if you enjoyed this show, you can go to our website and see the other shows that we put together at www.livetpg.com. You can also check out our weekly blogs, our 1 Minute Matters, where typically in 1 minute, you can read each blog that we put out. And then you can learn more about our book and ultimately the Pursuit of Growth lifestyle, which again, it's all based on active progress and what we consider the 11 foundational elements of life. Cory, again, man, what a joy. This was so much fun. And man, we can't wait to do it again.
Hey, thanks, Greg. Thanks, Sammy. Appreciate it, guys.
All right, till next time. Peace.
Well, in the spirit of movie quotes, I'm going to say big gulps. Well,
see you later.
See you later.
Okay.
Love it, man. Have a good one, guys.